So obviously, Charlie Kirk passed away tragically recently, and not my typical content or not typically something I would even comment on or make a video about, let alone a post. Felt very compelled to do so today. I actually delved quite deep into his content, didn't know him extensively well, so I wanted to understand him a little bit more and really what was going on and just, formulate my own opinions and my thought processes behind it. And so I felt very compelled to make a video and communicate my thoughts and my message around this and really what's going on underneath the surface from my experience and my way of thinking. And so I want to correlate this to several different things. I'm going to riff on this and give you my take and help you understand where my head's with this, because I think it's interesting to hear and see a lot of different opinions that a lot of people are having. So let's talk about it from a variety of different ways. So, obviously very sad. Um, I don't think anybody should ever get killed just for something that they believe or making their voice known. I mean, that's a very sad thing, right? No matter what you believe. And it was interesting because when this happened, I was at a 3-day event, and so I wasn't even on my phone. I didn't even pull up any social media or anything like that. So didn't know much about it. Didn't know too much about Charlie Kirk. I've seen a couple of his debates very briefly, but after going through his content, I have some pretty strong views on the way I see things. And so as I looked into it more and more, I mean, my perspective was like, oh, damn, like that's really sad. I could just imagine like the whole world is kind of mourning, and didn't think too much of that, but then came to realize quickly that that was not necessarily the case. And there was a good portion of people from the opposite side, the left side, that was not only not mourning his death, but actively celebrating. And so, I heard a quote a while ago that said that is it a mark of an educated mind to hold an opinion without accepting that as truth. I think I might be paraphrasing a little bit. But so when I saw that there was people that was basically celebrating that this man had passed, I was like, okay, like what's going on here? Like that's pretty bizarre in my opinion. That's some strange behaviors. So delved deeper and deeper into it, and to be honest, I'm not even really much of a politics guy. I've delved into it a little bit in the past. Even when some George Floyd stuff came about, I was quick to post some things and got some serious backlash, and I think that kind of scarred me for a little while, and hence why I was hesitant to even make a post about this or a video in that sense. But so when I tell you that quote, it's because of the fact that I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna pass judgment on these people, even though that seems not like a great thing to do. So I would dove into his content a lot. I went down the rabbit hole, and I don't do that on politics stuff much at all. But I found this very fascinating, and I was interested to see, like, as I started watching his debates, I was very curious, and I was also very intrigued with how he approached things, because from my perspective, is this guy was being very patient, very kind, very understanding. Yes, he has opinionated views. He knows how to match people's energy when people are dishing it out. And so he does come in strong when that is the case, and when people are not making sense from my perspective. And so then I can kind of see where people are celebrating and getting excited about this, but like at the same time, like obviously never gonna condone that whatsoever. But I see why and how it happened, because he's very triggering to these people that don't agree with him. Now, let me share a quick story and why I actually do appreciate Charlie on a couple levels. Okay. And one of the things he continues to talk about is that violence happens when two parties of opposing views do not agree, but then also do not communicate, do not talk. And I couldn't agree with that even more. I mean, that's why I started my podcast over 4 years ago, was I wanted to have conversations and open up these discussions that a lot of people are not having and thinking about a lot. Because if there's a lot of thought, and again, from its opposing views, then that's when things can really clash. And that's why there is a large division in this country of what's actually going on. So years ago, I actively did this as well. Just it was kind of happenstance, but I had a friend that came in from Baltimore. He had some opposing views on police and brutality and just was not a fan. Also had some other friends that had been police officers. So I brought them all together. We had a powerful conversation. It was really eye-opening to have a powerful, respectful conversation of two opposing views so that we could have a discussion so that violence wouldn't ensue. And that's what we're seeing on the macro level, is there's not as much communication, healthy, respectful communication and conversation. And because of that, we all see what's going on here, and this is what happened. Now, there's a lot of things at play here, and these are not simple conversations. And I might dive into a little bit of his perspectives on the policies and different topics. But again, I'm not a super political person. I'm more of a human person. I wouldn't say like humanitarian. I mean, I love entrepreneurship and business, and I think this all ties into the core message. There's basically, I would say, two core messages that I want to communicate here on this video that applies much more to just a human level rather than any policies. Because that's the reality of things, is that's like, yes, we can talk about different policies. There's different arguments. There's different conversations. But what's really going on here? What's the bigger play? And there actually would probably be one other one that I'll probably discuss at the end as well. So, man, there's so much to talk about on this. So I saw a really good video. I might even put it down in the comments or in the description. But it was actually from a guy. He is black, gay, and was very much on the left side. And he held some really strong talking points because basically, coming to the point of like he was on the left and didn't agree with Charlie, but had conversations with him. And then he's ended up turning to middle and even towards the right. And when he would leave the left side or the LGBTQ community, he would get hated on. He would get ridiculed for going on and saying you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe, or whatever they're calling it. And it's just like that. Like, why is all this like hate coming from that? And he's saying and I would have to agree, is that most of this hate like comes from the left side. And it's these people that Charlie is debating on these videos, and they're getting very triggered, right? Regardless of what they think, they're getting very triggered. And so I heard a quote a while back that said, easily triggered, easily controlled. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I get triggered by stuff, and I have friends that get triggered by stuff, but like to the point of what these people were like, they're like blowing up on these that should be conversations, should be open dialogue. And that's the cool thing about what Charlie's doing, is he's allowing people to have this open dialogue, to have conversations, so it doesn't ensue in violence, which then ended up being what happened. Now, I have thoughts around that as well that I'll like to share as well. But it's interesting. And so one of the main key points reason I wanted to make a video on this topic is that, yes, that quote, easily triggered, easily controlled, but also having compassion for those people. Because, when we're easily triggered, it's not just like you make a decision to not be triggered or to be triggered. It usually comes, without a shadow of a doubt, from wounds. Like, almost think about like a open wound on your arm. If someone like hit it, that would hurt, right? And then you would freak out and like, why are you touching that? And you get all upset. So really it comes down to wounds, right? And again, we hold compassion, and I have my wounds, and I've worked through a lot of my wounds. But really, I think probably one of the biggest things that I want to communicate on this video is that, is people that are so angry and angsty about this and celebrating his death. I mean, like, come on, that's ridiculous. But at the same time, it's coming from these people's wounds. They're very wounded and, they need help, and we pray for them. Like, seriously, pray for them. This country is so divided, but it's because of the fact that they're so wounded. And you don't see that from people that are not wounded, people that are evolved, people that are emotionally intelligent. When you bring up disagreements, it doesn't turn into this bombastic argument, verbal argument. It's a conversation, because I'll come back to that quote that I shared at the beginning of this video, is that it's a mark of an educated mind, and I would even say it's a mark of a healed nervous system and an evolved human being to entertain a thought and not hold it as truth, right? Which is that ultimately is saying, like, have a conversation about it. So I think it really is time we gotta pray. And that's, there's so many things. I just really wanted to get a lot of these things out, because I went down a deep rabbit hole today, and really wanted to learn this stuff. But like, here's the thing that I'm actually really inspired by this. Obviously it's very sad that Charlie passed, and in the way that he passed, and I have thoughts around all of that as well. But like, here's the thing, is that, like, what I realized throughout all of his content, he debates, he talks about politics and policies and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's not really about that. It's far bigger, right? And that's the thing, is it's a far bigger play. It's a spiritual war. That's why we're divided. It's not left and right. It's not liberal, Republican. It's good and evil, right? And the coolest thing about Charlie's content, he's always preaching the fact that Lord Jesus is his Savior. And it's inspired me, because it's interesting, because I've even, like, over the last few months, I've been having this interesting experience. Like, I'm very rooted in my faith. Jesus is my Lord and Savior as well. And at times I've been a little shy around that and didn't want to, like, openly express that as much. Sometimes I would. Sometimes I got, like, a little overzealous and over righteous about it, that I felt, and had to reel it back a little bit. But if nothing else, like, this is a spark. This is a spark for me. This is a spark for, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people that are getting that spark back, that want to go back to church, that want to dive back into the Bible and get rooted in the Bible and have their conviction come from the Bible and their Lord Jesus Christ, right? Which is really, really cool. It's really, really cool for people to wake up in that sense. And so one of the things I'll tell, and then coming back to this concept of, like, these people that are getting very bombastic in their debates and their arguments with Charlie, it comes from a lot of trans, from what I'm seeing. I don't know a ton about this, but I do have one story that I will share here that gave me some perspective on trans. Now, one other thing that I will share is I saw this list of, and again, you get information from all over the place, and depending on which views you have, most of the time when you see this information, it's more of confirmation rather than information, because that's how the internet really works. And that's how our minds work. We talk about it on this channel all the time, how powerful our minds are. And, like, whatever we put out is what was going to come back. And that's how we're going to see things. It's like the law of attraction. Like, you go test drive a red Porsche, and then all of a sudden you see all these red Porsches. Like, whatever you focus on expands. Whatever you look for, you find. Whatever your beliefs are, you find confirmation. It's a confirmation bias. And that's what's really dangerous about just staying in your bubbles, whether that's on social or whether that's in person. You stay in these echo chambers and you don't get any outside perspective. So then it just becomes everyone talking about the same thing, thinking that you're right. And everyone thinks that they're right, as opposed to just having conversations and open up dialogue for people to have space to have opposing views, which is exactly what Charlie, his whole platform was all about. I mean, you can disagree with his thoughts, beliefs, policies, but you can't deny the fact that he gave people space to open up and have a conversation. And it was just the people that were getting triggered were the people that made it very combative. And at the same time, those are the people that are celebrating his death, which, I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? So this one story that I do have with trans is I threw an event, it was about a year ago now, and there was a guy that came to our event. And so then afterwards we were all at dinner and I was sitting next to him and he was sharing his story with me. And so it was really interesting because he shared this story about how he all of a sudden, I'll give more of the back story to it, but he started going on the path of becoming trans. Like, he was a guy who was born a man, and then he decided he was going to be a woman, and he started taking pills and doing the whole dance to do that, right? But didn't end up doing it. Came back and ended up being a man. But like, where this started was he got access to porn at a very young age. Okay, and we know how terrible, and I mean, just like to the brain, especially men, that we are very visual creatures. To look at porn at any stage of life is not good for us as men because it's so destructive to our brains. But at a very young age, like on a molding, adapting mind, are you kidding me? Like, that's probably one of the worst. It's almost like, I mean, you can take this for what it is. I mean, it's almost like getting hooked on heroin when you're 6 years old. Like, how terrible that would be. So this guy, he saw porn at a young age, and then because his mind was adapting so much so quickly, it came to that sense of like, he would start to look at porn, but then like the porn wasn't enough, and so he just dived deeper. And it's just like, any type of drug, right? You start with something small. You start with marijuana, and then it leads to coke, and then it leads to hard drugs, meth, coke, whatever, So it just keeps evolving, and that's exactly what happened to this guy that I met. And so he would watch porn, and then all of a sudden it would go dark, and then it would go dark, and then all of a sudden, like, I mean, I forget the exact ages, but like, I think it was maybe around like age 8, he was in like some really, really dark pornography in the like deep web of the internet, which is insanely scary, right? And so a reason I tell you all of that is that, like, I don't want to judge anybody, right? And that's one of my ethoses. But at the same time, I'm seeing that, like, I'm not necessarily agreeing with trans, right? And I'm still like formulating my perspective on this because this is all relatively new. But, if this guy, for this example, wouldn't have been introduced to porn at a very young age, would he have gone on the path to change his gender? No, not a chance, right? And I'd be very curious to hear more case studies on, like, what was that inception? What happened with people when they decided and they started going down the path of becoming trans? And I don't think it's coming from a real healthy place. I don't think it's coming from a God-centered place, right? God made us in his image perfectly, right? Man, woman. And you can transition from woman to man or man to woman with different genetic blockers and changing your hormones and all that kind of stuff, right? So you can change. We've obviously proven that, or people have proven that from what I seemingly understand. But God created man, God created woman. It's in the Bible. God created man, God created woman. Though it didn't say anything else. It was those two things, right? So what I'm saying is that I don't think it comes from a good place. I also don't think it comes from an organic, God-led place. Like, God didn't say, oh, I made you woman, and now I made a mistake. Oh, shoot, like, go do your thing and change your gender. That's not where it comes. And so me, be a God-fearing man, knowing that my Lord is Jesus Christ, I don't stand by that, right? Now I have compassion, and I have best word is compassion for these people, because I could only imagine what that would be like if I got introduced to this dark, deep, dark porn at a very, very young age. What that would do to me and the type of challenges that would come with that. But that's just like one example, right? I would just be very curious to even have conversations with trans people and be like, what was your childhood like? What happened at a very young age that started sending you down this path where you felt like you needed to change your gender to be who you really were and disagree with how God created you? I would just be interested to hear what those answers are. And instead of like changing things and making things different from what God made you, like, why don't we just go heal the source? Why don't we go have some emotional intelligence types workshops. I've been through those, and they're very challenging, and they force you to take a lot of personal responsibility. And unfortunately, from what I saw in my deep rabbit hole of all of this stuff today with Charlie Kirk and these people that are strongly disagree with them, is that it just doesn't come from a sense of taking personal responsibility, and I can't really stand by that, right? Again, I have love for those people. I love everyone. I have compassion for everybody. But at the same time, at some point, you got to take responsibility for your life, for your actions, for how you want to create your life. And that's, again, I talk about this all the time on this YouTube channel. It's like, that's why I'm so passionate about helping entrepreneurs, because it's not necessarily that they're business owners. It's not necessarily that they're, creating and building something. It's the fact that they're taking responsibility for their lives. Right? And that's what I stand for. That's what I stand for, is like taking personal responsibility. And I just don't see that a lot with the left side, and they want to just get more assistance. Right? That's the general gist. And again, I know that it's a multi-layered conversation, and it's not simple. But at the same time, I just want to say that like how about we just take, it's not a matter of like not liking or even to some of the words that they use as like homophobes or transphobes. It's just like, we all have opinions, just like they have opinions. And these are my opinions, and this is what I'm sharing, and this is how I feel about it. But my opinion is that we all get to take responsibility for our life. I just can't resonate with people that don't take responsibility for their life, and that's really where I stand. And I think the more that we can take responsibility, the more we can all come together and have these conversations and be more open. And again, taking responsibility, because like some of the things that I took a responsibility on were some of the hardest things that I had to take responsibility on, but they were the things that freed me up the most. Right? I went to emotional intelligence workshops this past week. I went to an emotional intelligence and business workshop that forced me to look at things that I was not proud of, even after I have done a lot of work over these last 38 years of my life. Right? But it's a continual process of continue to take responsibility for my actions and what have got me to where I am today. Because no matter what, we are always responsible for our life. Only the successful people like to admit that. Again, whatever we focus on expands. Whatever type of actions we play, we bring everything into our life, and it's all about taking responsibility for that. So it's obviously deeply saddening to see someone like Charlie pass, and knowing that his family is going to be very affected by this. His wife just came out with a statement. He's got 2 children that he's leaving behind, and how sad that is, just simply because someone had an opposing view and spoke truth. He had a mission. And again, like I said, this isn't a conversation really about left and right, or conservative, liberal. It's not about that. We're in a spiritual war, and it's people that are not accepting of a higher power, and they think like that they're responsible for everything. There's nothing that's overarching, guiding thing. And it's just like, at some time we just got to acknowledge it. Like, it took me a while to get where I am, and I want to go deeper with my faith and my relationship with Jesus. But it's also really cool, because now this is activating a lot of people to step into that, and the light will always win. So that's really what's going on. And I mean, that even parlays a little bit even into, I'll share briefly, there's just sort of some thoughts, but and this is something that Charlie talked about a lot, is like the government wants you to become just a lifelong permanent consumer, as opposed to a creator, as a person that takes responsibility. That's what they want. They want you to be docile. They want you to and they're just force feeding all this stuff. And that's what happens and that's a lot of the points that Charlie makes, is that people are saying like all this stuff happens. And then if you look at the data, which I know those things can be convoluted too, but basically the media is all governed by, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like, 5 companies that are governing like 90% of the media channels besides social media. And that's why everything's like kind of waking up a little bit. But it's like, how scary is that? Like the wealthiest people in the world 5 companies and families all own majority of them. And I've even seen these like side by sides where like all the news channels are saying the exact same message. Like no matter what, that's scary, right? And so it's hard to know what to believe. And that's why as you continue to deepen your faith, as I've continued to deepen my faith, it's my guiding compass and helping me understand what to believe and what to think and how to operate, as opposed to like looking outside of myself, looking to the media, thinking that the media has my best interest in heart and making decisions based on that. And that's what so many people are doing. They're just looking at what everything's going on. They get stuck in their echo chambers. And because of that, they just keep on reconfirming their beliefs that just came from a wounded place, which is really unfortunate, but that's the agenda that is being pushed. And until we open up and have conversations and express and listen to understand, as opposed to just listen to respond, right? Really hear people out. And that's what I got to learn out of, probably 5 years ago when we had that first initial conversation with 2 opposing sides. And it was a really powerful conversation. And that's what really sparked things for me. So I'd encourage you guys to, talk to people that have opposing views. When I made the post about George Floyd, that's what I actually did. I actually reached out to, people would comment and they didn't agree with me. So I was like, all right, let's jump on a call and we'll talk. Share with me your views. And we had conversations. And, did we come to an agreement of what like we both agreed? No, we didn't. But it was still powerful conversation. Just open up that and show that we're all human. We're all just like doing the best that we can. And instead of like throwing rocks and throwing shade at people and shooting people and killing people, why not just, show love for everybody and let people be heard and have conversations and know that they can be understood, right? It all starts within. It starts with all of us. So, yeah, that's all I really want to share. Thanks for listening.